I was sitting in the middle of nowhere, in a silent retreat that stripped away all distractions. No phone, no talking, no input, just me and the sound of my own thoughts. For the first few hours, it was manageable. But by the second day, my mind started to scream. It was like a wild animal in a cage, desperate to escape the quiet. I didn't realize it at the time, but the silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything I had been running from. And right there, buried beneath the mental chaos, something ancient started to stir. A voice, not loud, not even clear, but it was real, and it didn't come from my head. It came from somewhere deeper. That was the first time I truly heard my higher self. Not as a booming divine voice from the sky, but as a whisper that felt more like a memory than a message. It didn't tell me what to do. It didn't give me a plan. It gave me presence, a sense of inner knowing that had no logic and yet felt truer than anything I had ever heard. And I realized something profound in that moment. The higher self doesn't speak in words. It speaks in resonance. You've probably felt it before. That gut feeling that defies reason but turns out to be right. That intuition that says yes when everyone else says no. Is that moment of clarity in the middle of your mess. That's not just instinct. That's communication from the deepest part of you. The part that remembers who you were before the world told you who to be. The part of you that has never been afraid, never been lost, never been broken. The secret to unlocking messages from your higher self begins when you stop looking outside and start listening within.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Here's the paradox though. The more you chase the voice, the quieter it becomes. The higher self doesn't respond to desperation or noise. It reveals itself in stillness, in surrender. And that's the first challenge. Because we live in a world addicted to noise, notifications, opinions, distractions. We're constantly tuning in to everything except ourselves. And that's why most people never hear their higher self. It's not that it isn't speaking, it's that we're not listening. So the first real key is silence. Not just external silence, but internal. A willingness to sit with yourself long enough that the surface thoughts begin to settle. It's like muddy water. If you keep stirring it, you'll never see through it. But if you let it be still, clarity emerges on its own. That's what meditation is really about. Not escaping your thoughts, but observing them until they lose their power. And in that space, something else rises. A knowing, a frequency, a truth that isn't coming from your mind, but from your soul. The second key is trust, because even when the messages come, they rarely make sense at first. Your higher self doesn't speak in the language of the ego. It doesn't care about your fears or your plans. It speaks in symbols, in synchronicities, in strange nudges that make no logical sense but feel right. And that's terrifying, because we've been taught to trust logic over feeling, control over flow. But the higher self lives in the realm beyond control. It doesn't give you the whole map. It gives you the next step. And you have to be brave enough to take it without proof. That's the leap. That's the test. Will you listen even when it goes against everything you've been taught? Will you follow the whisper when the world demands you shout? Will you trust the invisible over the visible? This is where most people stop. They hear the message but doubt it. They get the sign but ignore it. They feel the call but run from it. Why? Because it requires change, and change requires death. The death of who you were for the rebirth of who you are becoming. Your higher self is not here to make you comfortable. It's here to make you whole. And wholeness requires truth. Not just the truth you like, but the truth you've buried. The uncomfortable truth about your patterns, your fears, your attachments. But when you start to hear your higher self, it will ask you to let go of everything that is not aligned with your highest timeline. And that's not a gentle process. It's a sacred dismantling, a divine unraveling. But here's the beauty. As you release what's false, you begin to feel lighter, freer, more alive. You stop trying to force life and begin to flow with it. But you begin to trust your inner compass more than the opinions of others. You begin to notice the difference between ego desires and soul desires. Ego desires feel like chasing. Soul desires feel like remembering. The higher self leads you to what you were always meant to be. But first, it strips away everything you were never meant to carry. Another key to unlocking messages from your higher self is curiosity. Not judgment, not analysis. Curiosity. When a strange thought comes through, don't dismiss it. Ask it why it's here. When a feeling arises without explanation, explore it. When a dream lingers in your mind, write it down. The higher self often speaks in subtle ways, through dreams, through art, through symbols in your daily life. Are you paying attention? Have you ever asked the universe a question only to see a random billboard answer it the next day? Or heard a song lyric that felt like it was speaking directly to you? Or had a stranger say something that pierced your heart? That's not coincidence. That's confirmation. The universe is the canvas your higher self paints its messages on. But you have to be awake enough to see the signs. You have to live with your eyes open, your heart open, and your mind quiet. And here's a deep question for you. When was the last time you truly trusted yourself? Not your identity, not your image, but your inner knowing, your deepest truth. The voice that comes when you're not trying to impress anyone. The voice that comes when you're still. And that voice is not outside of you. It is you. The real you. The eternal you that existed before your name, your story, your trauma. And it's still there, waiting to be heard. To access that voice more clearly, you must also clear your vessel. And that means healing. That means facing what you've avoided. Because trauma clouds the channel. Pain distorts the frequency. And if you're full of suppressed emotion, the messages get muffled. That's why deep spiritual work goes hand in hand with emotional healing. You can't bypass your pain to reach your higher self. You have to bring light to it. You have to feel it. Not to drown in it, but to clear the static so you can finally hear. The more you heal, the more clearly you receive. The cleaner your energy, the louder the guidance. And eventually, it's not just a whisper. It's a roar. A clarity so strong, you can't ignore it. And this is where it gets powerful. Because now, you're not just hearing your higher self. You're becoming it. Your thoughts, your choices, your presence begin to align with a higher intelligence. You stop operating from reaction and start living from intention. You become a living transmission of truth. And people will notice. They won't always understand, but they'll feel something different. Your energy will shift rooms. Your presence will disarm defenses. Your words will carry weight, not because you're loud, but because they're real. That's the power of alignment. When you are in tune with your higher self, everything you touch becomes sacred. Not because of what you do, but because of who you are being. But this journey is not always easy. There will be moments of doubt, moments when the voice goes quiet, moments when the world feels louder than your soul. Don't panic. That silence is part of the dialogue. Sometimes the higher self speaks through absence, to teach you to trust even when you can't hear, and to remind you that faith is not about always knowing. It's about always showing up. So keep showing up. Keep creating space. Keep listening even when it's uncomfortable. And most importantly, keep trusting. Because the more you trust, the more you'll receive. The more you surrender, the more you'll be guided. And the more you remember who you are, the more you'll live the life you were always destined for. There's a moment in every spiritual journey when everything you thought you knew begins to dissolve. It isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's as subtle as waking up one morning and realizing the things that used to matter just don't anymore. The career you chased, the approval you sought, even the beliefs you held like armor, they start to feel like heavy clothes you've outgrown. And you're left standing there, exposed, uncertain, but strangely liberated. That space, that emptiness, is not a void. It's a doorway. And behind that doorway is your higher self, waiting, patient, unwavering. There's a moment in every spiritual journey when everything you thought you knew begins to dissolve. It isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's as subtle as waking up one morning and realizing the things that used to matter just don't anymore. The career you chased, the approval you sought, even the beliefs you held like armor, they start to feel like heavy clothes you've outgrown. And you're left standing there, exposed, uncertain, but strangely liberated. That space, that emptiness, is not a void. It's a doorway. And behind that doorway is your higher self, waiting, patient, unwavering. To truly unlock the messages from your higher self, you have to stop trying to control the message. You can't script it. You can't manipulate it into telling you what you want to hear. The higher self doesn't speak to your ego's desires. It speaks to your soul's evolution. So sometimes the message will be uncomfortable. Sometimes it will ask you to walk away from something safe. Sometimes it will ask you to risk everything you've built, not because you're being punished, but because you're being prepared. Prepared for a life that's not based on fear, but on freedom. Prepared for relationships that are not based on patterns, but on presence. Prepared for a path that isn't predictable, but profoundly aligned. And the more you listen, the more you'll be stretched. Because the higher self doesn't lead you in circles. It leads you into expansion. And expansion means growing beyond who you were yesterday, even if it means letting go of what you once loved. Have you ever felt that strange pull towards something you can't explain? A place, a person, a purpose that doesn't make sense logically, but feels magnetic. That's not a coincidence. That's a calling. That's your higher self guiding you through resonance, not reason. And the sooner you learn to follow resonance, the sooner your life begins to align. Because resonance is the true language of the soul. It bypasses logic and speaks directly to your energy field. But following that pull requires courage. It requires you to stop outsourcing your decisions, to stop asking for advice from people who are not living the life you want, to stop waiting for signs that remove all risk. Your higher self doesn't remove risk. It redefines it. It shows you that the real risk is not in trying something new, but in staying stuck in something false. The real danger is not in failing, but in never truly living. And the moment you begin to embody that truth, the channel opens wider. The messages come faster. You begin to live in flow, not because life becomes easy, but because you become in tune. You start to notice that certain people leave your life effortlessly, while new ones appear with perfect timing. You begin to see that the universe is not random. It's responsive. It reflects your vibration. And your vibration is the sum of your thoughts, emotions, intentions, and actions. So ask yourself, what frequency are you sending out right now? Is it fear or faith? Is it control or surrender? Is it scarcity or abundance? Because your higher self is always broadcasting. The question is, are you tuned in to receive? And if not, what's getting in the way? Usually it's the mind. The stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we deserve. The fears we inherit and never question. The identities we cling to out of habit, not truth. And this is where the real work begins. The work of dismantling the false self. The ego is not the enemy. It's a tool. But it was never meant to be the driver. When the ego drives, you chase. When the higher self leads, you trust. And trust is the bridge. It's the frequency that allows the message to land. Without trust, the signal gets distorted. With trust, the message becomes unmistakable. And here's the wild thing. The more you trust, the more miraculous life becomes. Not because you're manifesting from a place of control, but because you're aligning with your soul's highest path. You begin to move through life with grace, even in chaos. Peace becomes your default, not because everything is perfect, but because you've stopped resisting what is. And in that surrender, you find power, not the power to dominate, but the power to align. That alignment becomes your superpower. But you start to predict what's coming, not because you're psychic, but because you're present. You feel things before they happen. You sense when something is off, even if no one else sees it. You know when to speak and when to stay silent. You become attuned to the subtle, and in that subtlety you find clarity. The higher self speaks in that space, in the pause before the thought, in the breath before the action. So how do you cultivate that space? You slow down, you simplify, you create rituals that bring you back to yourself. Maybe it's 5 minutes of silence every morning. Maybe it's journaling with no filter. Maybe it's walking in nature and listening, not with your ears, but with your whole being. The practice doesn't matter. The presence does. Because presence is the portal. It's the place where the higher self meets you. And the more you meet it, the more you become it. You begin to live as your higher self, not just hear from it. You speak truth, not to impress, but to liberate. You make decisions not from fear of missing out, but from trust in divine timing. You stop chasing and start attracting. You stop proving and start embodying. And suddenly your entire life becomes a message. A message of what is possible when a human remembers who they are. But don't expect everyone to understand. Some people will fall away. Some will project their fear onto your freedom. That's okay. The path of awakening is not about convincing others. It's about becoming undeniable. And the more undeniable your energy becomes, the more aligned your life will be. That's the paradox. The less you try to control, the more everything flows. And flow doesn't mean perfection, it means presence. It means being fully here, even when it's messy. It means trusting that every experience is part of the message, even the painful ones. Especially the painful ones. Because your higher self doesn't just speak through love. It speaks through loss, through endings, through the moments that break you open. Have you noticed that the most profound realizations often come after the deepest pain? That's not by accident. That's by design. Your soul came here to evolve, and evolution requires experience. Not just the light, but the shadow. Not just the joy, but the grief. And your higher self is guiding you through all of it. Not to punish you, but to initiate you into wisdom, into depth, into truth. So don't run from the hard moments. Lean in. Ask them what they're teaching you. Ask them what part of you is ready to be reborn. That's the real secret to unlocking the message. It's not in avoiding the darkness. It's in finding the light within it. It's in realizing that your higher self is not separate from your human self. It's the essence of who you are beneath the conditioning. It's always been there, waiting, whispering, guiding. And the more you listen, the more you remember. So take a breath right now. Feel into your heart. What is it trying to tell you? What truth have you been avoiding? What message has been trying to reach you, but you've been too busy, too afraid, too distracted to hear? What would happen if you finally listened? Not just with your ears, but with your life. Because that's what the higher self asks of you. Not passive listening, but active embodiment. But not just hearing truth, but becoming it. And when you do, you don't just change your life. You change your world.